it's Joyce Conroy, the Block Party. Always a joy to have Ernie Cefalu join us on Ernie's Corner. And today we're going to talk about Foghat. Ernie, it's funny because when people started listening to their music, many thought that they were a Southern rock band.
Yes,
And
yes.
it turns out that no, they finally realized they were a great British band.
Yeah. Well, they had this blues, the Southern blues kind of thing with them, but they also attached a real energy to it that really kind of became the groundwork that was being set for heavy metal. I mean, there were heavy metal when you think about the time. This is like, I think they were signed originally to Bearsville in like 1972. I don't know quite about much about that, but they were signed early on, and their sound was kind of unique and different, but it was also familiar because of the blues thing that they had to it. But you're right, a lot of people didn't realize that they were a British, metal, which became a British metal band. And Slow Ride was one of my favorite songs of all time. It was a later album than this one, but this one has a lot of great songs on it too. And they were real, the same way Alice was the godfather of shock rock, and brought it. There was nobody really except for Arthur Brown, and you and I had talked about that with, Fire. There was nobody doing that, nobody. And Alice sort of took it to a whole nother level and really stayed true to it, and that fostered in all these other people. I mean, I remember Leo Sayer tried to do a thing with makeup, and and they were all trying to. Then Kiss came along, but Alice really started it all, and in a way, Foghat was one of those grandfathers, if you will, or founders of heavy metal, and the fusion that they did with bringing Southern blues kind of into it to make it, I guess, easier to be accepted by fans who weren't used to it. And there were other bands like Black Sabbath and some of these other ones that came along at the same time. But it's interesting what happened when Bearsville started in, I think, 1971, okay, or 70. They were really groundbreakers, along with people like Denny Blackwell from Island, Neil Bogart from Casablanca, and the big one was Shep Gordon at Alive. They were breaking off into independent companies, the same way that the movie industry did. At one time, the movie industry, the movie companies owned the actors and the actresses. They owned them. They could lend them out. They could trade them. They could lease them out, and that's kind of what they did. But at a certain point, some of these actors, like Marilyn Monroe was an early one, Elizabeth Taylor, they started their own production companies. They moved away from the big movie companies and became independents, And so in a way, I kind of joined that together with what was happening in the music business. It's really funny, Joyce, because without music, movies wouldn't be anywhere near as good. And music can stand on its own, but I don't think movies can stand on their own without some kind of sound that accompanies that emotion. And for some reason, music is able to capture that. We're able to, when we hear a band like Foghat and we hear the uniqueness of it, or the Beatles or Jimi Hendrix, they paint a picture in our mind that we don't need a movie to do it for us. We can do it on our own minds. The movie business, and I'm sure. I mean, I think the one movie that comes to mind that didn't have music to it in my head was my Dinner with Andre. I don't know whether you ever saw that.
I've never
but
seen it.
Okay, My Dinner with Andre is a very interesting movie. It's just two guys sitting at a dinner table talking about everything, and that's it. It's like almost like an Andy Warhol thing. You have the girl descending the staircase for like 3 hours, over and over. So, I mean, it was really kind of interesting that these movers and shakers, like Shep Gordon, like Denny Blackwell, like Neil Bogart, those guys really, and, Albert Gross, I mean, he really, Albert was a big fan of Pacific Pioneers. We came to find that out later. And, we met Albert through Shep. And again, this is, I mean, every time we do a show, it's like this incestuous thing that happens where,
It
you know,
does.
it doesn't it. I mean, it all kind of goes back to it's like 3 degrees of separation. I mean, it just really. I think when you try to do the best you can at what you do, and people out there like yourself are doing a similar thing in a different industry, in a different vocation, you come to appreciate each other. You see the value that they bring. And I think Albert, along with Shep and along, with Denny Blackwell, because we worked with Shep at Alive Movies, Shep and Denny, we did a couple of movie things for them and posters and stuff. And Island Alive they got an Academy Award nomination for Kiss of the Spider Woman. So, Shep wasn't messing around. And Carolyn Pfeiffer was his right hand person who was really already entrenched into the movie business. So when she joined Alive, it all became, and Shep was really a risk taker. Shep really, he always tells that story about how when he, and I'm not diverting from Foghat, but it's interesting. When he went to see Alice for the first time, everybody got up and walked out. He was the only one there. And he was able to see the fact that these people could communicate. It was just the messaging that needed to be sharpened and strategized and customized, And when we took on Foghat, it was very much a similar thing. We were, Albert had signed them a couple years earlier, and they were starting to get some airplay. And he wanted they needed branding. I did some research when we first got the assignment. My research was basically restricted to Tower Records, where I would go and try and look. There was no internet. This is 1974, man. There was nobody even knew, except for the government, what a computer was. So I went to the record store and tried to look up some of their catalog stuff and the bands and trying to study what they were about. And all they had was a name and some funky lettering, and this little guy with a big hat was like a cartoon. And it was really not connecting with the brand. Okay. We didn't know it then, and I didn't know it then, that I was creating branding. I didn't know what branding was. I was listening to the music and creating an image that I thought would, reflect what the music was trying to convey. And so, when I looked at that little guy and the albums that they had before, it just didn't really connect. It was a disconnect for me. And I needed to, do something more that they can use, like I did with Alice, like I did with the Rolling Stones, like I did with Jesus Christ Superstar, something that could live on beyond just an album. It had to be more than that. It had to be everything. It had to be them. So that when you saw that Foghat logo, you knew exactly what it was all about. And you knew their music, and you knew, and I think, and I'm jumping ahead here, but that's the logo I did. So I looked at their catalog, the little guy with the hat. I mean, it's cute, but it's not their music.
It's cartoonish.
It's cartoonish, right? And that's not to say that cartoons sometimes can't carry the day. It depends on the cartoon. And this was a cartoon that was really not, it wasn't really their music, and it wasn't really them. And so I felt that the first thing that we needed to do was create a logo, to create something that, that they could use for this album that would reflect the music, that also could be used after this, live concerts, ads, brochures, other albums, and which I did a lot. I tried to stay away, and we've talked about this before. I tried to stay away from fads, tried to stay away from trends. I tried to create something that would live beyond that and would be a lifestyle. It would become a lifestyle. And I got that from the Beatles. The Beatles did that. I mean, they were just amazing. They changed music. They changed the way we listen to music. Before the Beatles, when there was a hit from a group, whether it was Ricky Nelson or Elvis Presley, you expected the next song to sound sort of like the last one.
Formulaic. It was very
they
formulaic.
Broke the mold. They broke the mold on that, and they changed the same way Jimi Hendrix changed the way guitars were played. The Beatles changed the way we listen to music and the way we understand. They brought a whole new level to music and to the music fans. And that was something that I was really influenced by. So that when I started doing album covers, because we talked about this, I never thought I'd make a career out of doing album covers. I was a music fan. I still am, but I never looked at it as like, well, this is something I could do for a living. I mean, it was, even though I was into graphics and design and stuff, it was really never a main focus until, basically until the Dolls Alive thing came along, and that begot the Jesus Christ Superstar, which we got the Rolling Stones song, which we got, 250 album covers later, and 53 years later,
Yeah.
here we sit. It's really kind of funny. But so I wanted to create that for this album. And we were given, God bless Albert, he was such a nice man. And they furnished us with a lot of photography, but it was all individual photography. It wasn't a group shot, I mean, they weren't thinking that way, but they just took some shots of the bands. And so they gave us what I had to work with, is what you see there on that front cover, the four of them, and I put them together and did this technique to make it look like it was on a TV screen that was kind of fuzzy and, not real sharp, because the photography wasn't really that great, what I had to choose from. And I was given a name, Energized. So, what do you do with a bunch of individual shots and something that looks like it could be energized, and something that could look nostalgic but also look badass? So we created, Carl Ramsey was one of the illustrators, staff illustrators there, along with Drew and Bill and Ingrid, and he was the airbrush guy. And he was an amazing airbrush illustrator. So I gave him the assignment, and I said, I want to do something that looks kind of like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, but I want it to be really electric, and I want it to be something that I could look at 10 years from now and not feel like it's totally dated. So I created that lettering. I created the logo for Foghat. I created the lettering for Energized. And again, like a lot of the other fonts that I've done, I never really, people say, well, why didn't you create the whole font and sell it, as a font that people could buy? Well, it's not that easy. When you design a font, well, like the Bee Gees or Foghat, there's only so many letters that I do. If you want to sell this as a font, you have to create all the letters, all upper and lowercase, or just all caps, if that's the way you sell it, and all the numbers and all ampersands and exclamation points. All that needed to be designed, and I never had the time, even with the Bee Gees, which is one of the, and Alice. I mean, I could have created it, but I didn't have time to do it. And in those days, when I was doing lettering, and we talked about this before, that was all done by hand. What you're seeing there in those logos and that lettering, it was done as line art. Energized, Foghat, and the Foghat lettering you see over my shoulder here, that was all done in black and white. Carl Ramsey took it and made it airbrushed, and made it look like that. And on this album, Carl did the lettering on it. On some of the albums, like Canned Heat, One More River to Cross, I do the lettering right on the artwork. This was done by Carl, but it was my lettering that he took and put, on there, and then airbrushed to make it look like it was electric. I didn't really know how to do that. So on this one, again, having a great team, having a team of people that can bring value to an idea. For me as a creative director, and mainly an idea guy, I was the idea guy, and I also happened to be able to do lettering. So that was really my expertise that I brought value to the overall piece. Drew had his, Bill had his, Carl had his, and it was great to have a team. I think there was at one point 5 or 6 illustrators staff that I could go to, so that it didn't, when you didn't have that kind of a reach, when you didn't have that kind of an arsenal in your toolkit, things started looking the same. Whether it was this album that you did something for, or the next 3 albums. I mean, it was really easy to slip into that. Well, I'm doing what I can do, and even as a creative director, because I knew a few, I became friends with a few in record companies. They were mainly just assigning stuff out, and they were really getting a piece Okay, they would get this guy to do an illustration or that person to do some lettering. And they were different people. The beautiful thing about Pacific Ioneer is we had all that talent under one roof.
Yes.
We could stand toe to toe with anybody. And we did. We took, when we were, with Nestle, we were taking away work from huge agencies. When we got Alltech Lansing in 1974, I think it was, we took it away. 6 major agencies, Leo Burnett, Shia Day, these agencies, we were competing with that account. So we could do the work and take away the work. And we did that for 30 years at Nestle, taking away work from authorized vendors that were huge agencies, because they would give the client, the same with the music industry, they would give the client what they knew the client would buy. They didn't ever push it. Okay, we were disruptive. We pushed it. We came back. I mean, they gave me a handful of photographs and I came back to them with what you see here.
I just
You
love
know,
it. Disruption pays off. I am in all of that too, Ernie. I'm looking at that, and I think it really communicates what the band was about.
yeah.
You
And
were
the back cover too, most people only look at the front cover. And again, I'll send you these images so that you can see them bigger. But, I mean, this is a beautiful piece of artwork that Carl did on the front and the back, and carrying through the theme of using these individual photographs, but not ever alluding to the fact that they didn't have enough to work with for a front cover. And this happened a lot. I mean, we've talked in the past about it. They'll give me like, well, the Fifth Dimension, the same way when we talked about the greatest hits. We had one group shot that was really not even worthy of a back cover, and they were trying to make a front cover out of it, and all they had was individual shots. So it's easier to do an album cover if you're going to show the group on the cover. I mean, if you have all of them in a shot,
yeah,
and you go ahead. I'm sorry.
people want to know who the musicians are. I really do believe that. Some there's a thought. Like with Chicago, they. I mean, I love Chicago's logo, but you never really got to see the guys, and they were great musicians. And
Yeah,
when I look at this at that back cover, you get to see the musicians, and they were fantastic musicians.
they were. They really were. I mean, they were. And again, I was a fan of theirs before we got this album. I became a bigger fan with this album, and I became a huge fan with Slow Ride. I mean, that was just like an amazing cut, and it really sort of solidified them to the status that they needed to be. I mean, a lot of people, really didn't understand the band, at least at first, like we said, and I think that they stuck to it. I mean, I got to really give musicians who struggle. I mean, Bob Seger is the one that comes to mind for me. I mean, he spent 30 years playing, crappy little, rat hole, bars and stuff. And then all of a sudden with the Silver Bullet Band, he became huge, I mean, and that's perseverance. That's believing in yourself. I mean, I know so many people that tried and gave up because the belief in themselves really wasn't as strong as a commitment that it needed to be, or maybe they just needed to give it a little more time. We talked about this before. Timing is everything. I had a very good friend who in the 70s who was really talented. He could sing, he could dance, he was funny, he looked like Christopher Lloyd. He had this unique personality, and he sounded, when he sang, he could sound like Sinatra and all this stuff, but he gave himself a time limit. If I don't make it, he was from Arizona, if I don't make it in 2 years, I'm going back and working in my dad's company. And that's what he ended up doing. But it could have been 2 years and a month, and it could have been it. I mean, he had, sticking with it, perseverance. I mean, I never doubted myself. There were times when I thought, well, maybe I should be doing something else, that whether the industry was slow. In the 80s, there was a big transition of the music business for us into corporate America, more and less into the music business because it was fading for us. And then you get to a point where going, well, maybe I should try being a sales guy, or maybe I should try doing this, or maybe I should try something other than art. Even though I've done all these things, but it's like depression. Some people get eaten up by it. Do I get depressed? Yeah, once in a while. But I try and get right out of it. I mean, it's like I don't have time in my life to worry about things that I can't control. I can't take enough time to waste my time worrying about this when I should be doing that. And I kind of, depression, very rare, self-confidence from time to time. But then you get to the point, well, what else could I do? I really can't do anything else. I'm a total savant. I really am. I know how to do this at what I do. And like we talked about in the past, how lettering came together for me, the way concept became something, because before Pacific Eye and Ear, I thought I was an illustrator. I thought I was a designer. I thought I was, I could pick good type fonts. But the music business changed my whole life. It was more than just going from doing ads for, New York Life Insurance and doing an album cover for Alice Cooper. It was a major transition, but yet a very comfortable one. It was like finding a pair of shoes that really fit. That kind of pair of shoes that you don't even realize you have them on. And that's kind of what the music business did for me. Because before the music business, it was about corporate America and that status of getting to be a creative director on Madison Avenue and cutting each other's throats and, being a snitch and all that stuff. And it
Yeah,
didn't,
you
a
can
lot of
trade your
politics.
passion for glory.
Yeah.
The thing that when I've talked to you, for the time that we've done Ernie's Corner, I like because you get this idea and you really know your client, especially with the bands. You really know what they're about, and that idea comes to formation, and you go for it.
Yeah.
Even I mean, I'm sure you probably have had times when you thought, "Well, I don't know if this is going to work," but you
Oh, gee, no, I never had that.
and I'm looking at this Foghat design. Ernie, did you ever get any feedback from the musicians like Lonesome Dave or Roger Earl or
No,
anybody?
no, no. We just dealt with Albert. Albert was the community, the link, and
Yeah.
and they were always out on tour or over, Europe and stuff, and we were here in California. But I would have loved to. I would have loved to, have met them. I never really even got a chance to go one of their concerts. I didn't go to many concerts, mainly Alice concerts and Burton. Alice would let me go out on stage dressed like a ghoul and throw stuff out to the audience. I mean, it
I
was
didn't
really,
know that.
oh yeah, yeah, sure. Well, only when he was here in LA at the Forum. I did that several times where I'd dress up like a ghoul and you'd throw the balloons out there, or you'd do other stuff to the audience, walk across the stage all messed up. It was really, and backstage was really great. I really enjoyed, being with the Alice Cooper, the Alive family. They were really wonderful people, and Alice and Shep. I mean, they're just really, and Dennis and Neil. I mean, and GB. We were really close to Glenn, but he had passed away, and he was really. They were really nice, all of them. And I'm hoping that there's going to be some great news that I can share with you
I hope so. Oh
soon.
my heavens, yes. Oh,
Soon.
I'm going to hold a good thought on that one, Ernie.
Yeah, yeah, there's going to be a few things that we're going to be talking about in the future, but it's really funny. They were a great. It was a great cover to do, and it was kind of a real challenge because you needed to do something, and you had all these bits and pieces. How do you put all these bits and pieces together? That's why I really like the way this album came together from behind the scenes, where you look at the cover, you look at the back cover, you don't think about the fact that, well, they had to put four pictures together on this front cover and figure out a way to incorporate it with something that looks energized and, and doesn't look like it was cut and pasted. I mean, the angle, the way they're angled, the technique that I use to make them look like they're on an old TV, or a video monitor. And then on the back, I mean, you never really stop to think of, well, why are there individual shots and not a group shot? Because I use them with their instruments and their names. And so you kind of got a chance, like you said, to see them, and better than on the front cover, and again, we were, and I've talked about this in the past, Pacific Pioneer was more of an illustration company, illustration based, doing album covers. Companies like Hypnosis in England, they were really a photography based album cover design. They did all the, well, they did Dark Side of the Moon. They did, Storm Thurgeson and those guys did a lot of album covers. They were mainly photography, and we were mainly illustration. I mean, it was really kind of weird. Although they did some illustration and we did some photography. But in this cover, we combined both. It would have been pretty boring to just have, I mean, even like on the Fifth Dimension cover that we talked about, it would have been very easy to do individual shot, but we wanted to make it more. We created those borders, trying to make it look like a circus poster, greatest hits. It made sense. This kind of energized thing, you think of something. It's so funny because now everything is on computer, and this could have very easily fit in today as it did back then because it was futuristic then.
Yes.
It's today now. I mean, it's like, not that I'm any kind of visionary or anything, but it just seemed to work really well and carry through the group. I mean, they were an energized group. They weren't, musicians on stage and they're all standing around and the singer's singing into the microphone and doesn't have any animation to them. They were really an animated group live. And I've seen videos. I unfortunately, never got a chance to see them live in person. But today, you don't need that. You got, YouTube, and you can see anything and everything on YouTube. So
you are so right. You know what's happening now? I'm looking at the blue, the pictures, together of the musicians, and Energized is the name of the LP. It seems like the blue, when you look at it real close, fades in and out like it's like a strobe light.
Almost like a psychedelic thing. That's my LSD years in college. Sort of trying to bring that into that. Yeah, and it is those colors and the metal around it. It's not silver. It's got golds and stuff, oranges, because those are complementary colors.
Whoa.
The most complementary color to blue is orange.
That I never knew. I never knew.
Yeah, well, I'm very much into color and how to use it, and yeah, those were the colors that looked electric. And when you don't think about it, you're just looking at the screen, but the whole cover emulates the electricity because of the colors that we're using. On the back, it's all black with that electric. I mean, it just pops.
It does.
And so it was, and the same with their logo. They used this logo for years after many albums after the one we did. But like I said, before this, they only had that little guy with the hat, which is, it's cute. You said it's cute. It's not heavy metal. It's not blues. It's not anything other than a little cartoon that's cute. And they're not cute.
You're right.
Heavy metal is not cute. It's strong and it's bold and it's powerful. And I wanted, that's one of the other reasons why we chose this kind of idea of an electronic piece of equipment, because it's got power, and so those are the things. There's something that's energizing that cover to light up like that.
You were right on, as we would say in Baltimore, because when I look at the lettering, their power was the thought that I got. When I immediately looked at it, I said, what is coming up in my mind? And I've always told you this, Ernie, you have a very great way of taking, I guess, something subliminal, and communicating, beyond language. I mean,
well, it takes all those little pieces.
Yeah.
I don't have the luxury of language when I do something. It's one image. It's one image that has to convey and incorporate all the language that went into formulating that one image. And that's why I don't have the luxury of, thank God for you and the block party and our neighbors on the corner who enjoy this show every week and my little segment, that I'm able to give the language that goes with the image, because without my language to it, it's just a cover. It's just art. It doesn't really have all that went into it. And I really appreciate you, Joyce, for understanding that and realizing that, because I didn't have the luxury of 1,000 words or even 5 words. I had the name of the album and the group, and that's it. And as I was looking for some stuff the other day for the Fifth Dimension cover and the Monkeys cover mainly, I found a stack about 8 or 9 inches tall of albums that we can choose from along aside from the list that I sent you. I'm not kidding you. When there's over 3,000 pieces that I have in my space, aside from just the 350 album cover art pieces and music related pieces, there's thousands of printed pieces and sketches and comps. And we're going to talk about that in the future too, because we have plans for all of that, and for our neighbors and fans of the groups to be able to get originals. Be
I
able to get
am getting
originals.
excited, Ernie. You always make us excited. By the way, we were speaking with Ernie Cefalu, founder of Pacific Ioneer, and we are talking about Foghat this evening. Now, Ernie, you know the magic question is coming up.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Let me wave. I don't have a magic wand with me. Let me grab a pencil. Like I said, the world of imagination. All
That's
righty.
right. Well, I hope that we're in sync on this one. I mean, again, like I said before, Slow Ride was one of my favorite songs from them, but it's not on this album, which is okay because this album had a lot of really good songs on it. My first choice, I was vacillating back and forth to between two, Wild Cherry and Honey Hush. Those two songs from this album were really my favorites from this album. So any one of those that you want to pick, I mean, you always pick the right ones. I mean,
And you
you
do
know,
too. You do
well,
too.
we kind of in sync with that, and and again, I really I look forward to this every week. It seems like every couple of days it's Thursday.
Yeah.
I guess it's because I'm getting older and time just seems to, like I was telling Bonnie the other day, every day seems like Saturday. And then there's a Thursday that I do Ernie's Corner, but sometimes I can't remember what day it is, and it's partially because I stay busy and I also now have a life. I'm able to say no to things that I don't really want to do. There was a time when I had to do everything. You had to take chicken poop and try and make chicken salad out of it, and that is an art all into itself that was able to sustain my being able to do what I wanted to do my whole life. I always tell people I never had to have a job. Not really. Only when I got involved with the financial part of whatever company I was having, because I had 3 or 4 companies after Pacific Ioneer, but none of them were right. And being the last 12 years, 13 years, I've been on my own, which is great. It works out perfect because I'm able to say no. I'm able to say this time that was for sale 15 years ago is no longer for sale. That time is my time, and that's not for sale. And I enjoy being able to do that. I mean, I never thought I'd ever be able to say no. I and Bonnie and I, we just in October we'll be together 57 years.
I saw the nice picture of you two online. It is
Oh yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah.
She is a great partner, and I've said it before. She's my biggest fan and my harshest critic. Always has been. She keeps me on the straight and narrow. Before I met her, I was really good at lying and stuff because I had an Italian mother that you had to lie to about what you did. And she got me out of all that. So, God bless her. God bless you. God bless our neighbors. I really enjoy this every week. And next time, not the next time, not this time, but the time after this time, we have a Rolling Stones that's going to blow people's minds.
Oh, we are teasing you. We like to do that on the block
Yes, we
party. And
do.
Ernie's Corner should not be any different.
Thank you, Joyce. I appreciate it. I love you for it. I mean, you've just given me a great platform to be able to have these images live on. Like I said, it's how I and a handful of others created images that will live on forever.